I had heard 3 separate times the same exact message. I was sitting in my bathroom listening to a podcast, putting on my makeup, getting ready one time. Another time I read it in an article, and then I heard it again on a TikTok I was watching. But 3 times in 1 week, I heard the same message. And that message was...
There have definitely been times where I've thought about walking away, but this is my heart's song. My calling is to help the world be a better place by helping individuals develop. How about you? I mean, you started your career in teaching and then have evolved into a business owner, keynote speaker, author. Has there been a time that you've ever thought about walking away? What attracted me to partnering with you, with coming over to Ultra, starting this podcast, is one word: real.
Hey there, and welcome to the Shift Podcast. I am Amy Pechacek, and I am here with my co-host, Cassandra Rambo. Cassandra, tell us who you are.
I'm an experienced leadership coach and speaker, and above all else, I am here to help people lead with their heads and their hearts. So as we're transitioning into starting this podcast, I'm sure people are wondering, why another podcast and what can they expect to hear?
Yeah, so this is going to be a podcast that's not filled with leadership jargon, highlight reels, the best of the best. This is unscripted, unfiltered, real stories, real people, those things that made an impact in their lives, the big things, the little things, and everything in between, but the lessons that they learned that helped them achieve success, help them be who they are today.
This is the real stuff, the messy middle, those brave moments that maybe people don't see, but they're integral to leaders' journeys.
Yeah, you're going to hear conversations about leaders who've had to unlearn things. Not just things they learned, but things that they had to unlearn, bad habits they had to quit, things they had to rethink, and being able to rebuild from where they were to where they are today.
And the beauty about what we're building here is we're going to be right alongside you as you're hearing from these leaders. We're going to be referencing tools and tricks and practical insights that you can start applying in your lives today.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, today. Because for adults, it's all about taking those things and being able to apply them in their lives. So you're going to hear things that if you're craving more courage, or if you need clarity, or if you just need some little quick tips and tricks to help you be better right now, today, those little bitty things that will help you be a better leader, a better person at work and in your life. That's what our goal is to do for you. All right, Cassandra, so let's go. Let's do this thing. The title of our podcast is The Shift, and we named it that on purpose. Now, we did get some feedback from people. I put some posts out on social media, and I asked for people's input, and I think all 3 of the titles that we had as finalists, any of them would have worked. And so a lot of people were giving feedback and telling their stories about how one thing happened in their life that changed the entire trajectory of their life. So when you think about that for you, Cassandra, what is one thing that has happened in your life that has made a huge, big, significant difference in who you are today, or maybe where you are today?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is knowledge of self. And that, how many books and webinars and series can you do on the knowledge of self? But really getting in touch with your core values. What's your mission? Why are you here? That then becomes your North Star that you, let me speak from me, that I make decisions off of for me and in my life. And so I wasn't interested in doing this same old podcast, where we talk to super successful CEOs and what did you do? No, I want the real leadership stories. When you talk about a shift, that means something happened, something that was real, that maybe wasn't public at the time, but how did they work through that? So what made you want to start this podcast?
This podcast is meant to encourage people. It's meant to let them hear from real people who've lived these lives, who've made dramatic changes in their lives, and who've come out on the other side even better than they were before.
And so that kind of ties into the title of this podcast, The Shift. But you, in your training, talk a lot about making small shifts. So when you say shift, is it a little shift or a big shift? What's the word shift?
One of the things I love about the tagline is it's like one insight away from changing everything. And so the shift can be a minor shift that you start making, and you change one little habit in your life, and you keep doing that consistently day after day after day. And the further you go down your path, the bigger difference it's going to make in your life. One of the analogies is the 1 in 60 rule. And what that rule says is that for every 60 miles an airplane travels, if it is 1 degree off course, it's going to travel a mile off course. When you think about it, the further that airplane travels, the further off course, off its destination it's going to go. And they say that if an airplane was to leave JFK in New York City and fly to Los Angeles, LAX, and it was just 1 degree off, it would land 40 miles out into the ocean. And I like to say that's where dreams go to die. But I want to take that analogy and flip it on its head. So that's the downside. That's the bad side. But when we talk about what if you were to implement something to make yourself 1 degree better or 1% better, and you started doing that every day? Those are the little shifts that we can make in our life that will eventually make a huge difference. The shift doesn't have to be something great. It can be those little bitty, small, consistent things that you do every day and implement in your life. And whether it's the small, little, consistent changes that people make, or something major and drastic like what happened in my life, either way, you can think of what does it take, that one little thing that's going to be the catalyst for change in someone's life.
That's huge. And I'm immediately drawn to thinking about big shifts. One of the things that you and I have talked about is in my career, the difficulty I've had owning my strengths, we'll say. And so when I think about the shifts that have occurred in how my career trajectory has gone, they've started with little things that end up being a very big thing. So I love that the shift is big enough to encompass both.
When you think about the word shift, what is the first one that changed you? What's the first thing that happened in your life or career that made a big difference in who you are today?
Ooh, this is unscripted, but I immediately thought of my 5th grade teacher. That was when I vividly remember falling in love with reading. And when I fell in love with reading, that meant I did it more. I did it in my free time, but it also meant that I got moved up into the advanced reading group. And that really set me on a trajectory for a love of learning that, I have to this day. So, my 5th grade teacher popped into my head.
Isn't it crazy how those things, they happen all those years ago? I mean, I have my own story of things that happened in childhood, but something that was maybe not significant to someone else, but for you as an individual, it made a huge difference in who you are today. My parents bought me a set of childhood encyclopedias, like a kid's encyclopedia set. They probably didn't think anything of it when they bought it because neither of my parents are readers. But that encyclopedia set sat in my bedroom, and I started reading encyclopedias at a very young age. Like you, now I have a love for reading. And I think really people who make the best leaders are people who have that mindset of they want to consistently learn, they want to consistently grow. So thankfully, you and I both learned the love of reading at a very young age.
Yes. Yeah. And that's been the bedrock for everything else that I've done. Had I not loved reading, I don't think I'd be as hungry of a learner as I am. And I know you're constantly audiobooks and getting info, but there's also a shift that I have to make pretty much daily. When is it okay to stop consuming information and translate that into action? So for me, that's the shift. I feel comfortable in the learning and amassing knowledge and information. The shift, like I said, on the daily that I have to make is, okay, now what are you going to do with that knowledge?
And that uncomfort that you're feeling, that's kind of like stepping out of your uncomfort zone and doing something scary like this podcast,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, it's interesting that you say that because I had heard 3 separate times the same exact message. I was sitting in my bathroom listening to a podcast, putting on my makeup, getting ready one time. Another time I read it in an article, and then I heard it again on a TikTok I was watching. But 3 times in 1 week, I heard the same message. And that message was, you've been consuming for years. It's time to start creating. That is one of the reasons why we started the Shift podcast, to give back, to help people learn from the things that we learned. You know, I've been researching leadership and business development and people skills and interpersonal skills and emotional intelligence and conflict resolution and all of these things for close to 20 years now. And so for people who some of these topics are new to, we can help bring this information to them, and they don't have to wait 20 years to learn about it.
To your point, I think for people that haven't had, years in corporate training or, people development, some of these concepts are pretty complex. Yeah. So that's one of my hope for this podcast, is that we can break down these things, because it doesn't need to be, you need a PhD in organizational psychology to understand how to be an effective leader, right? So I think there's an overcomplication of these topics. So yeah, I love the idea of us breaking them down.
Is there ever a time you wanted to walk away from this work? And if so, was there a point that pulled you back into it? And what was that?
I have spent, I have wasted so much time wishing and hoping, and even at times trying to be someone I'm not. So the foundation for my career, for my life, is really owning who I am. And there's 2 core aspects of my personality that I've really struggled with. One is I'm a very competitive person, very driven. I like to win. I play to win. If there's not a winner, what's the point in playing? That's very much like my mentality. And then I have this, God love my father, this hard Protestant work ethic, right? Like you nose to the grindstone. And if you work hard enough, your work's going to get recognized. Well, I've tried working in corporate, working in consulting, and I would get parts right. I would have, the team dynamic that I absolutely love, but I miss the pace of consulting, and I like doing lots of new things. Okay. But when you're in consulting, your team is your client team, and that can change a lot. So yes, there have definitely been times where I've thought about walking away, but this is my heart's song. My calling is to help the world be a better place by helping individuals develop. How about you? I mean, you started your career in teaching and then have evolved into a business owner, keynote speaker, author. Has there been a time that you've ever thought about walking away?
Oh my goodness. A lot. Every day. No, not every day. A lot of times I have. And the reason for that is because, there's so much work that's involved in this that people don't see behind the scenes. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of courage to own your own business and do your own thing. There's a safety net with working for corporate America that when you don't have that safety net anymore, you're just kind of free falling. But that is analogy for the trust and the faith that you have to have in being a business owner. And for me personally, like I have to trust God. I have to trust Jesus that they're going to be that safety net for me and that they're going to take care of me and show me the next right step. One reason why I have thought about stepping back at times is because you have to put yourself out there. You have to be okay with rejection. You have to be okay with judgment. So people are going to judge you, and you have to be okay with people who have known you their entire lives, who knew all the ickiness that you've been through, all of who you used to be before you grew into who you are now. They're still seeing you in that light. And so there was a time where I was not the person I am today. And the people who knew me back then they probably still think that's who I am. So putting yourself out there, having a website, a company, speaking at events, and then having videos made of you and being asked to be on other podcasts, starting this podcast, all of those things are things that I had to consider pretty significantly. I had to do a lot of reflection and soul searching before I decided to, you know what? Okay, it's time. And it's a lot easier said than done. A lot of times people, and even I say, you cannot think about what other people say or whatever, but people think. But at the end of the day, we're human. And the human side of me is what has resisted starting a podcast up until now. But that little thing, that little fear is what kept me from doing it until now. And what's interesting is that's the same exact fear that held me back from becoming a public speaker when I did years ago. That fear of judgment is strong, and it kept me from doing it. I would, what are people going to think of me, or who does she think she is? You hear all those voices in your head. It took a while, and it took a lot of feedback from other people for me to kind of step into the fact that, I kind of am a leadership expert. I can help companies. I can help individuals. And I have a gift that gift is seeing things in a way that other people might not see it, and being able to help them come up with a solution to make things better in their life or their team.
The other thing, having, watched you as a trainer, been part of your trainings, partnering with you now in these business ventures, you have a gift for holding space and presence. And I think that's very hard to quantify, put a number on it. But man, that makes the difference when you're helping people with their own shifts, right? To be able to be that reflection back, but in a new way with that new perspective.
And one of the things that I love about you is the very first time I met you in person, we were in California, right? And it was at an event. We had several conversations on Zoom meetings, team meetings, things like this, emailing back and forth before we ever met in person. And so I kind of got to know you a little bit that way. But when I met you in person, face to face, and was able to kind of feel firsthand who you are, I was so incredibly impressed with everything you had going on, all of the things you were managing at that moment in time, while at the same time creating space for people and having conversations with them. Tell me a little bit about how you were able to do that and how we got here to where we are today.
I talked to you before about these aspects of my personality, the competition, the drive, the high achieving aspect of who I am. That means that I have a commitment to excellence, but I'm people focused. So what excellence looks like in my interactions with people, are you feeling seen? Are you feeling heard? How am I helping you make whatever shift you're going through? So that means when I'm running events, when I'm at conferences, I'll hit pause and just give you my focus, because I know at the end of the day, you might not remember the hors d'oeuvres you were served, but you're going to remember that interaction that you and I had. And that's planting seeds. People have done that for me my whole career. And so it's a little bit of a pay it forward thing, but it's tied to my own personal mission, which is my deepest calling is to help people find their deepest purpose. So if I only get 3 minutes with you, that's where my focus is on you. What attracted me to partnering with you, with coming over to Ultra, starting this podcast, is one word: real. I have been in this space for close to 15 years now, either working in corporate HR departments, in consulting, and it always goes up to a point, but won't go over. So we want servant leadership training. Okay, great. I can design that and I can deliver that for you. But unless you're willing to go that extra step of looking at your operating procedures, how people interact with one another, how people get rewarded in their compensation, well, I'm sorry, but you're only going to get to a point. So if my deepest purpose is to help people discover theirs, then that means I can't be put in a box. I want to do lots of different things. So my dream, my hope for this podcast is that this is a space and a place where we can be real about the things that we go through as individuals, as teams, to really normalize the human experience that we're all going through.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things you said was, you can't be put in a box. It amazes me that people are still doing that to this day. And we have these conversations about empowering people, right? Giving them the autonomy to make decisions, but yet people still don't do it. I believe the most successful companies out there are the ones that allow people to be creative and to explore and to try things out. People who dream big and who aren't afraid to take risks and who are given the autonomy to do something different, that's the kind of people that create huge impact in industries. And those are the big shifts. So what about you? Tell me, what is a shift? What is one of those things? Like, what is one insight that you've had that has completely changed your life into who you are today? I know you talked about fifth grade. Let's talk about as an adult in career and in leadership.
So throughout my corporate career, you do a lot of these personality assessments. And one of the things that kept coming up in different personality assessments is being able to name emotions. So I actually have it on my desk here. This is a feeling wheel. And if I had to give one tool that has made the biggest difference for me, it's this. Because the more granular you can be in identifying your emotion, the easier it is to unpack what's behind that. So I would, get in these ruts of, or cycles rather, of burnout. Work really, really hard, and then you're so exhausted, you get sick and you need a week off. I see you nodding. I know you've been there too. But yeah, naming my feelings, anticipating, okay, I'm about to go into that burnout cycle. What's going on here? Well, I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling overworked. Okay, well, is the overwork self-imposed, or is it the industry that I'm in or the company that I'm with? Those answers change depending on what stage I'm at, but it's a self-leadership. When I own my emotions, when I'm able to name my emotions, I'm then better able to show up for others. Where's your biggest growth opportunity for you right now?
This podcast is definitely a big growth opportunity. I as much as I love speaking on stage, doing corporate trainings, doing workshops, doing keynotes, events, and things like that, one of the things that people might not know about me is I am camera shy. And so that means having a camera in front of my face, like right here, right now, there's a camera in front of my face. That's kind of scary to me. And I had some branding photos made last week, and that was scary. So for whatever reason, that camera in my face is more scary for me than being on stage and speaking in front of a bunch of people. We do Zoom meetings all the time, and I'm going to tell you, I loved past tense when I lived out here in the country, and we had really weak Wi-Fi when I moved out here. And I just thought that was the best thing ever, because I was able to turn my camera off. Literally, if I had my camera on a Zoom meeting or a Teams call, it would glitch. So I had to say, excuse me, sorry, I got to turn this camera off. And I would turn my camera off. Didn't bother me at all. Now we have stronger Wi-Fi, and I can't do that anymore. So this podcast is going to be it's not going to be, it is a big growth opportunity for me, because not only do I have to see myself, I have to hear myself, and I have this camera in front of me. I don't love seeing myself on camera. So this podcast might be an opportunity for me to grow in an area that maybe is a little uncomfortable.
So the podcast is called The Shift. What is a shift that you've made?
Years ago, I was a teacher, like you said. When I left teaching, I went to work for a software company. And I'll never forget that I was in the area where all of our customer service agents were. And I was down there speaking to one of them who was on the phone with one of our clients when the head of the company walked into the same room. And he saw another customer service representative out of her desk, and she was speaking to another one. She was actually asking a question to be able to help the person who was on the phone with her, the customer, but he didn't know that. And he yelled and berated her, and everyone in the entire room could hear it. Now imagine how she felt in that moment, right? And my thought was not only how they were feeling, but how many customers could hear this, because it's an open room with cubicles. I mean, how many customers heard that? So working at that company and seeing the environment that a micromanaging or a leader who is not empowering and not encouraging and doesn't quite have all of those leadership skills that make for a healthy culture, a positive culture, that make for the kind of team that we help people create. And then along came this company that was started to recruit me. It was really easy for me to make the leap to go join them and to go work for that company. And you know what the crazy thing is, Cassandra? At that company, I had the absolute best boss I've ever had. He could be sitting there coaching you, but you know what? You're feeling like he's complimenting you. So when he would coach me, it felt like a compliment. And it wasn't until, hours or days later when I would reflect on our conversation, it was like, oh, wait a minute. He wasn't complimenting me. He was coaching me. And to go from this boss who was this tyrant to this boss who was the most encouraging, positive person you can imagine, this dichotomy, it literally started getting me curious. So I became curious and I started thinking, what is it about people that you can have such a positive impact on someone, and then others have such a negative impact or a disempowering impact on them? And that's what happened for me. That's when the shift happened for me, because at that moment in time, I started reading everything I could get my hands on human behavior, psychology, neurology, had access to McGraw-Hill Education, had access to all of the textbooks that we published. And so I read every single psychology book that McGraw-Hill had. I also started reading books on management and leadership and business development. But not only that, I had access to some of the best subject matter experts in the United States, in the country, possibly in the world. I would go to, because I was visiting colleges and universities, and I would go ask them questions and ask them, especially, some of the psychology professors, about different things. Because I was so curious about the difference in those one boss and the very next boss I had, their leadership styles. That curiosity, I believe, is what shifted the whole trajectory of my life and how I ended up where I am today.
Talk about making lemons with lemonade. In terms of, McGraw-Hill was a great experience for you, your best boss, like you said, but you also took advantage of the situation that you found yourself in. The testament to your resilience. So people talk about, you can learn from bad bosses, you can learn from good bosses. In your experience, which is easier to learn from, bad bosses or good bosses?
Oh my gosh, which is easier? I would love to say it's easier to learn from a good boss, but I think it's probably easier to learn from a bad boss, because those negative emotions are like catalysts. They're those things that sometimes it takes something really bad to happen in someone's life before they make a huge change, make a big change. It did for me, right? So it took a really tragic thing that happened in my life to make major changes in my life. So when we see what someone's doing that's not working, and it's not working in such a way that we actually labeled them as a bad boss, then we know that I'm not going to do that. I'm going to actually do the opposite of that. Okay. When you have somebody as a good boss, that's a great example. And look, we need good bosses out there. Please don't let this be an excuse to be a bad boss. We need good bosses. We need good leaders out there. But sometimes you take a good leader for granted. You can very easily take a spouse who you're very comfortable with for granted. You can take your friends for granted, your parents for granted, especially if they're good ones. And I would say the same can be true at times for people who have a good leader. Now, like for me, it was such a contrast that I definitely didn't take him for granted. It was such a night and day contrast that that curiosity made me observe him intently, right? And kind of take mental notes on the things that he was doing well. But I think if people haven't experienced those really, really bad bosses in their life, then it's a little bit harder to appreciate when you have a really, really good leader.
My aunt has this phrase where she says, life is like a mosaic. You've got pretty tiles and you've got some dark tiles, but you need both for the contrast. So I was actually going to ask you, so Gallup just came out with their, national employee engagement scores, and it's overall the U.S. workforce engagement is down. So there are a lot of people who, challenging economy, maybe a challenging leader. What would you say to people who are working for a challenging boss or feeling disengaged at work?
I had that same experience, that same feeling working for the boss. And I called someone who I trusted and admired and respected for advice. Now, this has been years ago, again, close to 20 years ago. But I'm going to give our audience members the same advice that I was given back then. So Anna Joy was my pastor's wife. And she said, Amy, remember, you were doing your work for the Lord and not for man. And that was such a huge mindset shift for me, right? So I wasn't doing my job for him. I was doing it for God, for Jesus and for me. Now, not everybody out there has the same faith and the same values that I have. And so at that point, then I would say, what are you doing your work for? Where is your integrity? What is your why? I believe we're at a place in history where, it didn't take Gallup for us to figure that out, right? I mean, it's evident. It's evident if you're on any social media or follow any kind of news at all. This work-life balance thing is big. It's big in the United States. It's big in the world right now. And the former math teacher in me, my mind has a little bit of a hard time making that connection of work-life balance. And I'm going to tell you why. It's because your life as a whole, like think of a pizza. You have a pizza, you have a whole pizza. That's your life. How are you going to balance that whole pizza with a slice work, right? So if you have work and, personal life and all the parts of the pizza represent your life, how are you going to balance a slice of it with the whole? Well, you can't. So the work-life balance thing, there's got, I understand the concept behind it. I do. But I believe there are seasons of life and seasons where we focus on different things. So in this season, you might be focusing on building your career. In this season, you might be focusing on building a family. In this season, you might be focusing on your health or learning, whatever that is. But there are seasons of life where we do focus on one or two or three things. If you're trying to say that work is a separate part of your life, then you're never going to have balance because you're always going to think of it as a separate thing instead of integrating it into a lifestyle that works for you. So I think integration is there. That doesn't necessarily answer your question around employee engagement. So let me kind of transition that way. There are people who have a strong work ethic, and the people who generally have a strong work ethic are the ones who are, like you said about yourself, driven. They want to succeed. They want to accomplish, or maybe they just know why they're doing what they do. Every time I've asked people, and look, I've asked hundreds, probably thousands of people throughout my career why they do what they do. So why are you at work? What's your personal mission statement, if you will? That's kind of like your why, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every time I have asked people that over the past couple of decades, there is one word that almost every single one of them use. And even the people who don't use the word, their personal mission statement still has this word in it, like as a foundation. And that word is help. Mm. People want to help other people, whether it's help their family, help the next generation of people behind them, help their students, help their kids, help their parents, right? So we want to be able to help people, to make an impact, to make their lives better. And so I believe the people who are most engaged at work are the people who have their priorities straight, have their mindset right. They know why they're doing why they are doing what they do. And they do everything they can to help the people around them. When you're talking about somebody who's engaged versus not engaged, the people who are not engaged at work, there's a couple of things that might be happening. One is they have that bad boss, that bad leader, that toxic work environment. Another thing is they're not in possibly the right role or the right career for themselves. You know, in order for us to show up and be the best version of ourselves, we have to be whole, healthy individuals. And part of being a whole, healthy individual is doing something that sets your soul on fire.
I agree. It's also like a self-leadership thing for me. And it really, victim mindset, don't get me like, I cannot handle victimhood because I just feel like this is my locus of control, me, how I show up, how I think, even how I think. Like a lot of people assume that they don't get to like choose their thoughts, that like their thoughts happen to them, but you 100% do get to choose your thoughts. I'm not saying you're going to feel the thought that you're choosing to think. That feeling kind of catches up later, but that's like rewiring of your brain. And so if you feel like, oh, my boss sucks, my job sucks, you know what I mean? It's like, well, no.
You know, I don't even think that we necessarily need like a Gallup poll to tell us that employee engagement's down. In the pandemic, we went through the quiet quitting, and then literally the next year there was the trend of loud quitting, and now it's just popularized across the nation where people celebrate each other for not giving their very best to their jobs. What do you think?
I think about it from two perspectives. So having worked in HR and organizational effectiveness, I think about what are the systems and processes that are in place that people are operating in day to day, because it might sound like a small thing to you, but it could be a big thing. So a couple of weeks ago, I was giving a workshop and there was an administrative assistant in the room. And we were talking about like, well, what are workplace triggers? What are things that like really get you wound up? And she was like, when technology doesn't work. Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense, right? She's booking calls, she's scheduling rooms, she's ordering, food and coordinating all of these things. If her tech doesn't work, yeah, that's gonna get on her nerve. That's a big deal for her. So I think about it from the org perspective, but then I also think about individual leadership. And you said this, and I've stolen it now. You don't like the word accountability, you like personal responsibility. And that's where I feel like if you are disengaged, you need to own the disengagement and then evaluate, is this something that I can like make a mindset shift in? Oh man, I almost is this something I can make a mindset shift in, or do I need like a career shift?
I think that employee engagement topic is something we could have an entire podcast on, right?
Yeah.
And I think we should have an entire podcast on it. One of the words that was a finalist in these podcast names, the titles that I still really like is the word unfiltered or the word unscripted. So when you talk about how we're going to have these real conversations with people, and that is the purpose of this podcast, even though we're not using those words unfiltered or unscripted, I absolutely believe that's what it should be. I don't have a script in front of me. I don't want you to have a script in front of you. I don't want the guest to have a script in front of them. We want to have these real, honest, raw conversations and say the things that are sometimes hard to say. One of the things that I love is we've decided to do a Russian roulette, if you will, at the end, where we'll have questions 1 through 10, let the guests pick a number 1 through 10, and then whatever question is numbered, that is what they get, as a way to give insight into who they are, things they've learned, but to provide value for the listeners. So I'm not going to ask you to pick a number between 1 and 10 right now, Cassandra, but I am going to surprise you with something that you didn't know about and that you aren't prepared for. So are you ready? This is going to be fun. You know, I checked my mailbox yesterday and I got the cutest piece of mail that I may have ever seen in my life.
And you've got a granddaughter, so that's saying something.
Well, thank goodness she hasn't mailed me anything yet. But I want to know about this. Did you do this? Did you paint this? Did you really?
Yeah.
So tell me about it.
So one of the ways that I decompress, one of the ways that I am able to do what I do is to have downtime. And so I do a lot of art. It's called expressive art. So it's not necessarily how good it looks. It's the process. If I'm feeling, angsty, it's a lot of marks like this. But you had shared with me that you recently lost 2 of your favorite chickens. And, the loss of a pet, I don't care if it's a hamster, a dog, or a chicken. It hurts. That hits deep. So, I didn't have a lot to give by way of comfort for words. But just creating that little piece of art and putting it in the mail to you was like a little hug from me to you.
And thank you for it. I so appreciate it. And, it was the personal touch, I think, that touched me the most, to use that word twice, but it was the personal touch that you put in it, that you literally hand painted it and hand wrote a note to me, to provide a little bit of comfort when I lost 2 chickens. A lot of people can't understand why that's important, but, or the significance of chickens.
Yeah.
But I'm an empty nester, and that's been a shift in my life, to go from having a busy household. I was a single mom for most of my kids' life, to being an empty nester is a huge transition. And the chickens, at least my daughter Erin, says that she kind of thinks they filled that void that she and her brother Nick had of something instead of someone for me to care for and to love. So, yeah.
So your comment about, the personal touch, I'd say that's another reason for digging into people's individual stories. We learn by relating to one another. And so when we have these conversations about what was the shift in your life and how did you make it through, I might not be able to lift and shift that example verbatim, but it's giving me hope that there is a way to navigate tough times. And that, an example of someone else who's been there, who's walked through that.